Think back 3,500 years ago. Imagine a map with India at the middle. There actually is no country or culture called India yet, but the earliest stirrings that will one day become India and the religion we call Hinduism begin at the top left of the peninsula, in the Indus River Valley, as the Dravidian culture is faced with a new incoming Aryan culture. To the left, 2,500 miles northwest of the Indus River, near the Mediterranean Sea's eastern coast, the religion we'll one day call Judaism begins to emerge from the Canaanite world that was theirs too. And 2,500 miles to the right of India, in the basin of the Yellow River of China, the Shang dynasty sacrificed to support their rule until the Zhou dynasty claimed the mandate of heaven and overthrew the Shang. These are the roots of Chinese religion. 3,500 years ago, the Aryans started immigrating in waves. Some of those waves went across Europe as far as Ireland, and some went south into the Indus River Valley. Some of the original Indus River people stayed, but many moved on, down to the Ganges River and across India to the eastern coast. Some moved even further south along India's two coasts, and the result is that for 1,500 years, India was two very different experiences. In the north, the Aryans brought with them their own religion, social structure, language, and way of life. Their way was Vedic religion, overseen by priests who carried out the animal sacrifices, accompanied by complex hymns. But this was no people's religion. The priests, the nobles, and the wealthy trading class participated, but they made up only a small part of the population. The vast majority were simply peasants, and the Vedic religion had nothing to offer them except the hope that if they lived according to the Dharma the priests imposed upon them, that set of social and religious requirements appropriate to their caste, they would benefit in the next life, being reborn at a higher caste. Around 600 BCE, a new intellectual fervor pushed back on that. Some of the priests began to ask if the hymns held deeper meanings, seeing there the idea that there was one spiritual reality, and that's what we are. Then, two great voices, Mahavira and Siddhartha Gautama, challenged the Vedic system itself. Siddhartha rejected the priests, their sacrifices, their scriptures, and even their countless gods. He rejected the caste system, and he rejected the cycle of rebirth that justified the lines between the castes. He taught that it was possible to escape the cycle altogether and experience a bliss that transcends this life. Well, the priests fought back, of course. They claimed as their own the idea of escape, which they called moksha. But they taught that Siddhartha, the Buddha, he had gone too far in rejecting the scriptures and the caste system. In some sense, this is the moment in which Hinduism is really born, even though that word still wasn't used yet. A line had been drawn, and on the Hindu side was the unassailable authority of the Vedas and the Vedic religion, and on the other side, where the Buddha had gone, was not Hinduism. Great new Hindu works were written with the new goal. In the section of the Mahabharata known as the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Prince Arjuna the new Dharma. And contrary to the non-violence of Mahavira and Siddhartha, Arjuna's Dharma demanded that he fight the war before him. Books like the Laws of Manu specified all of the details and restrictions of the new Dharma. But Hinduism still offered very little for the peasants and servants. That was about to change. One of the four paths that Krishna had explained to Arjuna was the path of devotion, called Bhakti. But by that, he probably meant going to the temples to worship the gods. But as people shared folk tales of the gods, and among the lower castes, goddesses, the deities became much more approachable, more human, more worthy of love than simply servitude. Moreover, the far south, remember them? They began to merge back with the Vedic traditions of the north. In the south, Shiva and the great mother goddess Durga had been central, and around 700 CE, all of the pieces came together, and the Bhakti movement broke out of temples and shattered the lines of caste and gender. Over the next 1,000 years, the path of devotion became Hinduism's most visible path. Oh, the Vedic tradition is still there. Some families still send their children to learn to chant the ancient scriptures in their original Sanskrit. Others focus on the more philosophical approach of Vedanta. And still others renounce all ties to the world to pursue the yoga path of exercise and meditation. Hinduism is all of this, from the chants of the Hare Krishnas to the meditation of the Self-Realization Fellowship to the elaborate pujas at the local temple. Siddhartha's way was different. He'd been raised as a Hindu, destined to be a king of a small kingdom. He lived in luxury, but he couldn't escape the anxiety that the good times were fleeting and always gave way to loss and sorrow. He wanted something the sacrifices couldn't offer. He wanted to be free from the worries now. So he left his royal destiny on a quest. He tried the Hindu way, but that failed him, so he sat and meditated. The result was the Four Noble Truths. Siddhartha had gone farther than either the Jains or the priests. He had accepted what must have seemed to him beyond challenge, that we're on an endless cycle of rebirth, trapped in a social hierarchy determined by our fulfillment or violation of religious duty. But he came to reject the entire system he had grown up in. The gods who demanded our rituals, the scriptures that defined the entire system, the priests who carried the system out, and most importantly, the inevitability of rebirth. Being reborn can never get us out of the angst of daily life, so he decided the cycle simply has to end. And he believed that he had found the way to end it. As the idea of Siddhartha's great enlightenment spread across northern India, the contrast with the approach in the Upanishads became clear. Although there is no central Hindu enforcement council, what we call India in those days was still just a patchwork of tiny kingdoms. So no king had the power to favor Vedic Hinduism. No king had the power to favor Buddhism either, and that changed with the rise of the Mauryan Empire, a couple of hundred years after Siddhartha's death. Under Ashoka, the empire stretched across most of the subcontinent and became the most populous empire of antiquity. And an emperor in that position could have helped Hinduism overcome the Buddhist challenge. But Ashoka sided with the Buddhists, and in the process he created the first world religion. He sent missionaries eastward and westward, and by his death, Buddhism stretched from Syria to Thailand. Like Hinduism, and like Judaism and Christianity and Islam later, Buddhism moved in several directions, both on a map and in the way its people did religion. In Burma and Thailand and Sri Lanka, Theravada emerged, and the serious Buddhists abandoned home, family, and daily life for the monastic life that Siddhartha had followed. But soon, another way, Mahayana Buddhism, gave the world a people's Buddhism. Mahayana took to the Silk Road out of India, to the west and to the north, to what are now Pakistan and Afghanistan, to Syria and China. Between 600 and 900 CE, Chinese Buddhism reached its zenith. Various schools were imported from India, and as they came into China, each tradition, Pure Land Zen, Nichiren Buddhism, crossed into Japan in the 1200s. Buddhism moved from China into Tibet too, but it almost went extinct in Tibet in the 900s. Ironically, a decline that was stopped by the assassination of the anti-Buddhist king by a Buddhist monk, no less. In the 1000s, a teacher from India, Atisha, started Tibet back on the path of being one of Buddhism's strongest moments. Buddhism's spread is not a single march, but a series of waves. Often one kind of Buddhism arrives first, only to fall off to the side of the new culture. And then a second wave arrives and the tradition takes deeper roots. Throughout its history, Buddhism was met by welcome, followed by fierce persecution. That was the way in Tibet, in China, Cambodia, Vietnam, and even in America. Buddhism came first here to the United States in the 1800s with the Chinese and Japanese immigrants. But American prejudice against Asian cultures and people kept it from growing beyond a strange, to us, Asian religion, until the 1893 World Parliament of Religions and the follow-up efforts of D.T. Suzuki. The West had discovered Zen. Since then, Buddhism continues to grow into an American experience, and that means change.